When I first started this channel back in March 2021, one of the first videos I made was from Brian Holdsworth, a theist who seems to fill a lot of gaps in life's questions with God, and then reaches to explain why that God is the only reason that anything makes sense. Well, apparently, life has no meaning without God, so I'm naturally very intrigued. Hello, I'm the Skeptic. I watch videos on YouTube that make extraordinary claims, whether that's flat earth or strange conspiracies, but mostly the claim that a God is real, and then explain why I can't accept their position. Before we get into today's video, please do subscribe, hit that bell notification to be alerted for my next video, and drop a like. That would be amazing. In this God Squad video, Brian Holdsworth, a YouTuber with almost 80,000 subscribers, talks about how God gives life meaning, explaining how people must feel without meaning, and then explains where meaning must come from. A lot of claims, I bet, with no demonstrating it to be the case. Let's see.
We are all familiar with the fact that we have basic needs, and we are even familiar with what some of those needs are.
I need to eat, sleep, laugh, amongst other things. I wonder where this is going.
We all need food, we all need shelter from the elements, we all need bear spray, probably.
Luckily, bears aren't a problem in South England.
We all need relationships with other reasonably functional human beings.
Preferably, for me, ones that don't assert things without proof. I get you, Brian.
But there is one that we seem to lack consideration for, or we overlook, or even if we don't overlook it, we lack an appreciation for what the implications of having it or not having it are. I'm talking about the belief that our lives have a certain meaning. I'm not just talking about the sum total, but even the more condensed experiences of our lives, that they convey some meaning to us. We may see this in the most pronounced way when someone is going through some kind of a crisis. That is when we are most likely to earnestly ask the question, why? Why is this happening to me? In the hopes that we can grasp some kind of meaning that will help us survive this situation.
Why does it have to be negative? Can't you do something positive and go, why did that happen? How awesome am I?
This is critical because without it, many of us would just give up. Many of us wouldn't be able to endure all the hardships, suffering, the losses, the difficulties, the distresses, or even just the daily grind of daily life.
Why? Haven't you ever heard of, if at first you don't succeed, try again? Maybe if you fail at something, you question your failure and give up.
Most of us don't want to be doing that work or suffering through those kinds of experiences. But since we must, there is a consolation in the belief that there's some kind of meaning to it. Even in, and perhaps especially in, our trials and tribulations, that there's some kind of lesson to be learned in the information that is being conveyed through those experiences, and that if we are attuned to it, we can grow in strength and wisdom.
Oh, there's so much being said here, which seems like a common theme when people assert things with no evidence. 1, there's some kind of meaning to why things happen. How do you know? How can you show that? 2, how do you know information is being conveyed through experiences? 3, how do you know you can be attuned to information through experiences?
Even a nihilist like Friedrich Nietzsche said that whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger.
Which is just a saying. And in no way do you need a God to understand that you can learn from your mistakes.
In other words, there is some good derived from my experiences, even the most unpleasant ones.
And
if any of us really conceded that there was no meaning or purpose to our lives and truly meant that, then I expect that there would be far more people who would tend to just curl up into the fetal position and stay that way in a state of paralysis, or worse, tend to want to do something like interrupt their process of being alive.
It sounds as though Brian has a presupposition that meaning has an outside source and is not just a construct.
So it is literally vitally necessary for us to be convinced that there is some meaning to the experiences of our lives.
No, it doesn't. Sure, it's nice to know that your actions have positive consequences, but meaning isn't necessary.
And that meaning is being communicated to us through the struggle of existing.
Okay, well that's an assertion. Surely it'd be a good idea to demonstrate it before continuing. Or maybe not.
In order to stay alive, which I think most people would agree is preferable, this need must be met.
if that would make you feel better.
So what does it mean for our lives to have meaning? Well, I would want to answer that by way of an analogy. Imagine you're walking down a trail and you happen upon an arrangement of rocks just scattered about. There are a couple responses that you could offer to this geological discovery. You could look at it and say, what does this mean? What is the meaning conveyed by this arrangement of rocks? Or you could look at it and assume that it has no meaning. It's just the consequence of a long, random process of cause and effect.
Great. So 2 outcomes, one determined, one coincidental. How do we figure out which is the right path? Or do we go, I have no explanation. It must have been God. No, we don't.
The former scenario where you ask yourself, what does this mean, is another way of asking, what does this communicate? That's what the question means. It's a way of asking what information, what knowledge, what wisdom that I don't currently possess is being communicated to me as long as I discern the facts that are available to me, which is this arrangement of rocks.
If you're getting a message from a set of rocks, I would really have to question your integrity.
And the only way that it can communicate something to you is if there is a will and an intellect communicating something to you by it, because it takes an intellect to arrange information and compose it in such a way that it can be received by another intellect, and it takes a will to actually perform the process of communicating it, whether it be through words, smoke signals, an arrangement of rocks, or through a written language.
But you'd have to demonstrate it was arranged, not just assume it was, because, like you said earlier, it may not have been.
If you're on the other end of this kind of a communication protocol and you ask, what does this mean? You are assuming that there is an intellect and a will on the other end of that transaction trying to communicate the apparent meaning to you.
But does assuming it make it true?
And so it is with our lives. We cannot ask questions like, what does this mean? What is the meaning of my life? Or what do particular experiences mean and what information is being conveyed to them? Unless you assume that your life is derived from an intellect and a will who is communicating this information to you through those experiences.
Which is why it's far easier to say, I don't know why that happened. I wonder if I can avoid it happening again or make it happen again, but in a better way. Why do you have to assume there's a message there at all?
The alternative view is that you are a temporary expedient in a random, meaningless, chaotic sequence of cause and effect that doesn't convey any meaning or purpose or really any information at all.
Yeah? What of it?
And that might be a logical conclusion based on a particular interpretation of the evidence that is available to us.
And one which is far more reasonable to end at, I don't know why that happened, instead of assuming that there's a message there, especially since you can't demonstrate that there even is a message.
But if you do make that conclusion, then the least logical thing you can do after that is try to retain some belief that such an existence is still imbued with meaning. And we've already established that our lives have to have meaning in order for us to survive the paralysis that will descend upon us without such a belief.
No, that's absolutely wrong. I don't believe there's meaning behind the things that happen to me, yet I continue.
Now, some people would look at that and say, well, that's fine. You can derive your own meaning. You can invent your own meaning so as to be at peace with your own existence. You don't need a god or a higher intellect to derive that meaning from.
And that would be a great part to end the video, Brian. You just said it, but no.
Which, if we can revisit our analogy of the rocks on the trail, is like saying, well, these rocks don't actually mean anything, but I need them to mean something, so I'm just going to pretend like they actually do mean something and that they're communicating something which they are in fact not.
He's really good at knocking down his own arguments, right?
Why would you need to do that? Most people would look at that and say, well, you don't need to do that. Not every arrangement of matter in the universe needs to be communicating some hidden message to us. Yet it is vital that our own lives do communicate some meaning to us, and it can't just be arbitrary or an invention of our own fancy, because that would undermine the very fact that we need true meaning that comes to us from something external.
I don't remember drinking when I started this video, but apparently I'm wasted now because that made no sense.
When we say what is the meaning of a particular experience, we are saying what information that I don't currently possess is being communicated to me through this experience.
Demonstrate there is a message being communicated, and if you can demonstrate there's a message being communicated, then you get to work out what it could even be. You're skipping a whole step.
If the answer to that is, well, just invent your own meaning, well, then the question has remained unanswered, because the question is asking for information that I don't currently possess. But if the answer is, well, just invent something from the inventory of your own thought, then the answer is attempting to offer information that you do currently possess in response to a need for information that you don't currently possess. That merely ignores or avoids the question in the hopes of avoiding a more difficult conclusion, which is that our lives do have meaning, and that meaning is being communicated to us by an intellect and a will that is far higher than us.
Hands up, who lost where that was going?
High enough to know the answer to the riddle, what is the meaning of our lives? And that is what we call God.
And that would need to be demonstrated. That whole video was Brian assuming his position, word vomiting some claims that were never proven and then saying, well, it must be God. Great. I might take the same approach and declare myself the king of a country. Why not, huh? What did you think of Brian's argument? Feel free to add to the conversation below. But for now, we can skeptic the need for a God to offer meaning to life off the list. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. From me, the skeptic, stay safe, keep thinking logically and ask questions. Skepticism is the first step towards truth. See you next Saturday.